Hi, I'm Carol Boyce. I'm a homeopath from the UK. My history is that I was working on a PhD in biological anthropology at London University when I was diagnosed with a incurable disease. So, like so many homeopaths, I was in search of a solution for myself when I came across homeopathy, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I've been a practitioner now for almost 40 years. I'm a published writer, I'm a teacher, an activist in terms of homeopathy, and a filmmaker, which I'll talk about at the end. So I am working at the moment on a full-length documentary about homeopathy um, called Introducing Homeopathy. But again, we'll talk about that at the end. So what have I done for the past 40 years? I have worked in clinics. I have set up teaching clinics in places as diverse as India, in Egypt. I was in Iraq during the first Gulf War, sharing homeopathy with the local medics who at that time had no resources, if you remember, back in 1991. So suffice to say, homeopathy has enabled me to create an incredible life. It's involved me traveling to many incredible places. I'm incredible. I'm a person of superlatives, and homeopathy allows me to express all those superlatives. So, yes, an incredible life sharing the gift of homeopathy with people all over the world. So, as you can see, I'm still as passionate now as I was when I first discovered it all those years ago. Um, and it's my mission in this life to share that passion with other people. So that's what we're going to do today. As I said, um, I'm going to do a working hypothesis, and I hope that you will indulge me. As I said, I'm known for my hyperbole in some regards, and my thesis supervisor back in the days of the PhD used to call me Donna Quixote because I was always attempting the impossible with one arm tied behind my back. And nothing's changed, except somehow those things always seem to work out. So I'm going to keep on doing it. Here's my hypothesis. Homeopathy can save the world. So in a hypothesis, we always have definitions and assumptions. So the definition is that the world is taken to mean all living things, plant and animal, the water, oceans, rivers, lakes, the soil, the air, humanity, and as a consequence, Mother Earth itself. Estimated time frame, I believe this process has already begun. Um, Evidenced both by the blossoming of homeopathy and the opposition that we get. The projected completion date for this is way before 2050. So that is my optimistic aim. Hypothesis assumptions. Homeopathy is a system of medicine founded by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann and presented to the world in 1810 with his organon of medicine. The system is based on the law of similars, which is a natural law found throughout nature. And we're going to call allopathic medicine the current pharmaceutical-led paradigm. And I want to separate that as a system of medicine from the medical doctors who are working within that system. So those are our assumptions. And I'm going to do one side of the argument and the other side of the argument. And I hope by the end of it, I have proven my hypothesis. Homeopathy can save the world. So advances in medicine, I'm asking, are they really advances? So yes, we've got technology, we've got medical technicians, diagnostics, incredible diagnostics now, microsurgery by remote, by robotics. Is that really an advance? Because that is not the interface where the treatment of chronic disease takes place. Allopathy has to have a diagnosis before a treatment protocol can be given. And when that treatment protocol is decided upon, it will be a one size fits all, no time for investigation into the underlying cause. And after a 7-minute case taking, usually I'm talking about, for example, in the UK, in the National Health Service, you would be prescribed one of the big five: antibiotics, antihistamines, steroids, anti-inflammatories, or painkillers. If you didn't fall into one of those categories, you would be sent to see a specialist, which would divide you up into a single organ or a single system in the body. From my perspective, something isn't working. If we look at iatrogenic disease, that's medically caused disease, doctor-caused disease. It's the third leading cause of death in the US. It costs the National Health Service more than $2 billion a year. The cost of the pharmaceutical medicine places a huge burden on families, especially in places like the US, where you are hooked into an insurance program. Therefore, it bankrupts health services. And the cost of medicine increases while the health of the main consumers is decreasing. So, what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at the research, something else isn't working. For the first time in 200 years, children are not expected to live as long as their parents. National New England Journal of Medicine. 1 in 6 children in the US have learning difficulties. At the current rate of increase by 2030, 1 in 2 children will be on the autism spectrum. And the rate of chronic disease in children is higher than ever and increasing year on year. So something definitely isn't working. As the pharmaceutical industry is still pushing for a monopoly, it's becoming harder and harder for them to produce safe and effective blockbuster drugs. And the World Health Organization has declared 2020 to 2030 to be the decade of the vaccine. On top of all of that, antimicrobial resistance is already here. So this is when antibiotics are no longer going to work, which has immense implications. And then the effects of pharmaceutical pollution, which is something that we don't think about very often. The level of that kind of pollution in our environment is a major issue. It's well known and yet almost entirely unregulated. So when we think about it during the manufacture, the use, and disposal of pharmaceutical drugs, active pharmaceutical ingredients are released into the environment. So we have significant levels of APIs in drinking water, wastewater, sewage, sludge, and soil. And an incredible 30 to 90% of any pharmaceutical drug is excreted in the patient's urine. It can't be removed in the water purification process. So think about things like the contraceptive pill, for example. So what we know is we're all taking pharmaceutical medication, even if we don't use pharma meds. It's a bit of a sobering thought, I think. So the pollution during the manufacture of antibiotics adds to the overall problem of antimicrobial resistance, especially in the food chain. The reproduction of mollusks and crustaceans, seafood basically, are disrupted by antidepressants. Sex ratios in fish are skewed by the contraceptive pill. And US and Europe use the most pharmaceutical products, but their manufacture is outsourced to the developing world. So therefore, this problem of pharmaceutical pollution is now global. Real science is increasingly rare. Definition of science and medicine involves investigation, asking pertinent questions, and more importantly, being open-minded to new possibilities that have not yet been considered. So this is harder to adhere to when the major funding comes from vested interest corporations. So what do we have as a result of all this is a sinking ship. For example, the Cochrane collaboration, which is was the world's most prestigious scientific organization and the go-to resource for balanced reviews of research. It was an independent group of global reviewers, and it has now been co-opted by a donation from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. All these things count, follow the money, as we say. So where is this money coming from? What are we doing? We're creating a dangerous monopoly where we're relying on the pharmaceutical industry to solve the antimicrobial resistance problem. I mean, I'm saying here it's close to a tipping point. The reality is it's already here. So even routine surgery will become a huge risk. And orchestrating a situation where we are now relying on the pharmaceutical industry to solve this, it's the gravest of errors. Research the problems and solutions. We are living in strange times. So the experts we relied on can't always be trusted. We've learned that over the last 5 years. And profit-driven vested interests have become incredibly powerful. Eminent professionals in the world of science have found out that if you have ideas which are not within the restrictions of accepted ideas, you can have your entire career shattered. So what we want to know now is, where has all the independent science gone? Interestingly, Richard Horton, who's the editor of The Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, said that 50% of scientific research can no longer be trusted. The implications for our health from a statement like that are potentially catastrophic, if we think about that. The medical profession relies on that research. Problems with RCTs, randomly controlled trials. This is the gold standard of medicine. Randomized placebo-controlled trials, which test the efficacy of a one-size-fits-all medicine within a very constrained circumstance over a short period of time. So what we see is that medicine is all about efficacy with RCTs, whereas how we use medicine is all about effectiveness, because an RCT does not give any indication of what the drug is going to do with a real patient in real time, in the real world, over a longer period of time. And we all know stories about drugs like Vioxx, which had to be retracted. There's many. It's a problem. Honest doctors can no longer practice honest medicine. Dr. Asim Malhotra, professor of evidence-based medicine, consultant cardiologist, leading obesity campaigner. He was always on the BBC in the UK until he started realizing that there was something wrong in medicine. In 2018, he addressed the European Parliament with a presentation about problems with evidence-based medicine. And he spoke of his sadness and frustration that honest doctors can no longer practice honest medicine, which again has huge implications when the medical profession is dependent on the research is dependent on funding from essentially the pharmaceutical industry. And Jimmy Wales, of course, the founder of Wikipedia, is a self-confessed anti-homeopathic campaigner. So it makes it impossible to correct Wikipedia. You can go in there and make corrections, and within an hour, your correction will revert to the previous iteration. All right, so that's the evidence for one side of the working hypothesis, and now I'm going to give you the evidence for the other side of the working hypothesis, which I'll just remind you is that homeopathy can save the world. It is the future of medicine. So let's look a new way of looking at health and disease, dis-ease. I'm calling it dis-ease because really it comes from a sense of dis-ease. You feel like something's not right, but because of the way the medical profession is set up, you can't go and say, I have a sense of dis-ease. You have to have some kind of pathology that will show up on a test, which means that you're already quite far down this road before you can get a diagnosis. This is part of the challenge. So pharmaceutical medicine has serious shortcomings. We accept side effects as the norm. We accept that's the best we can hope for. But this is the sad situation for many people. We need a different kind of medicine for our time. What is that? We need a viable alternative, which is a primary care medicine, safe, gentle, effective, supporting nature and the body's attempt to heal itself, affordable, which is a huge issue nowadays, and crucially, and this is like revolutionary thinking, which is remarkable that it's revolutionary, where each generation will be healthier than the one before. That isn't what happens now. So we need a new definition of health, essentially. The World Health Organization says that health is a complete sense of well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. I would like to expand that to include altruism and the ability to adapt to change. So keep that definition in mind as we work through this other side of the hypothesis. So we have become disconnected from what our health is, how we define our health. We no longer trust ourselves to heal ourselves, let's say. We hand our health over to others for fixing. So yeah, we say we are healthy apart from, and then we list our arthritis, our acid reflux, our migraine headaches. Chronic disease is accepted into our definition of healthy. I'm kind of laboring this point a little bit because I really want you to think about this and how we just spiel that out. That's how we've been taught to think about health by the dominant medical culture. As long as we're not in hospital, we're healthy. As long as we can drag ourselves to work, we're healthy. We are very far away from the sense of health that we have when we get out of bed in the morning and we feel a joie de vivre and we want to do adventures and get through life and express our passion and all of that. Sadly, that's quite a rare thing nowadays. So we urgently need a sustainable medicine. This is the other side of it. It's a safe, effective system that also protects our fragile environment. So humanity needs a system of medicine that can offer true preventative care, enhance our immune system, protect our mental and emotional health, works with nature, and enables us to truly resolve our issues and create increasing health. So again, the current system tends to be a disease-focused system, whereas what we're trying to create is a health creation system. How do we create health in ourselves? And as practitioners, how do we help other people to create health in themselves? It's a huge shift in the paradigm. What was disparaged is now self-evident. I want to say that all these things, the power to create and preserve health. So again, I've already said, not a disease-oriented, but a health-oriented system. Making a connection between mental, emotional, and physical health. The importance of food, exercise, the impact of stress, the danger of underlying inflammation, the value of meditation, of mindfulness, of walking in nature, wild swimming, all those things which were things not really in a conscious state of people's imagining of how to create health. All that is now supported by direct scientific evidence. Back in the UK, you can get a GP's prescription to go to the gym or to spend time in nature. Light years away from over medication. So it's coming, but it's an uphill, basically. It's an uphill. Back to revolutionary thinking, a primary care medicine with a commitment to make each generation healthier than the one before. And that is prevention of disease from birth and actually preconception if both parents are healthy. And the recognition that every living thing has at its core a dynamic energy, what we would call a vital force that maintains your homeostasis. It keeps everything in balance. So therefore, we need a medicine that is also dynamic in its action. But we're moving away from material medicine, from chemical medicine to dynamic medicine, to energy medicine, to the physics of life, if you like. So just to remind ourselves, our body never lets us down. That there's a kind of, it's part of that, oh, I'm healthy except from, and I would have been fine, but somehow my body's let me down. Our body never lets us down. We push our body with our lifestyle choices. And we accept our chronic disease into our definition of healthy. So again, what if there was a system of medicine with a different perspective? One that addresses our evolving medical problem when it's still just a sense of something wrong, when it's still just that dis-ease. Our tests are negative, but we know all is not well. We know it. What if we could reset the balance before functional change or organic damage occurs? That's a kind of revolutionary thought at the moment. So individualized susceptibility is the key. So if you don't take anything else away from this, take away the idea that susceptibility is the root of all of it. That is not blame. It's about taking responsibility. So 3 levels of susceptibility from our point of view: inherited weaknesses. So that's basically what you come into this world with. Life events, we all have them. Things happen, grief, people leave us, we have a car accident. How you deal with them, and then lifestyle choices that undermine your health. So those are the things that we decide: how we sleep, how we eat, whether we exercise, the kind of relationships we have, etc. So that is your individual susceptibility, a combination of those 3 things. So again, susceptibility is the key. And so not blame, but responsibility. It means making empowering choices. So the easiest one is what we would call maintaining causes, the things that keep your health in a kind of jeopardy, if you like, that undermine your healing ability. That's your lifestyle choices, as I say. So eating, sleeping, exercising, the kind of friends you have, the kind of place you live. Is it damp? Is it dark? Is it all things which might impact your health? Making healthy choices about how you deal with life events. So do you put your, in my case, not in my case, because I learned the hard way to change this, but as a Brit, you would be taught to have a stiff upper lip and march on no matter what is happening to you. It's a very unhealthy way to deal with emotion, with grief, with trauma, with all kinds of things that happen to us in our lives. We need to deal with it well. We need to get help. We need to make choices about counseling, sharing, the kind of medicine we might use if we have an accident, etc. So that is a huge area where you can make empowering choices. And then last of all, inherited weaknesses. So we need a system of medicine that can prevent them from being expressed in our lifetime or being passed on to the next generation. So the inherited weaknesses that I have, what can I do to stop myself expressing those in my lifetime? And then if I choose to procreate, what can I do in my lifetime before that happens so I don't pass those inherited weaknesses onto the next generation, which again is a pretty revolutionary thought. All right, so I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, having studied this now for more than 40 years, because I was a scientist before I became a homeopath, homeopathy is such a system of medicine that can deliver all the evidence that I just presented. This is Samuel Hahnemann. He's one of a very few doctors who have a monument in the US. He was a German. So this in itself is phenomenal. It's in Scott Circle in Washington, D.C., if you're ever there, and it's a very beautiful monument. Absolutely lovely. So somebody thought he was worth putting a huge monument in place. He presented, after 30 years or so of work, he presented something called the Organon of Medicine, which is a very small, thin book. And in that book, in 1810, he talked about vibration, resonance, and other areas which are now incorporated in the new biology and quantum physics. He talked about the microbiome and how important it is to the health of the being, whether it's a human or an animal, and in its own way, a plant. He talked about epigenetics. He didn't call it epigenetics because it's the new science of epigenetics, but homeopaths have been using it for more than 200 years. He knew that genes are not fixed, they are mutable, and he created a system which enables you, the person, to turn your genes on and off. Phenomenal, which means, again, we don't have to pass our inherited weaknesses on or express them in our own lifetime. He created individualized medicine. So he talked about how important it is that the medicine is individualized to you because you are an individual. Remember the susceptibility? your inherited weaknesses, your life events, and your lifestyle choices, no two people can be the same. So therefore, your medicine needs to be individualized. He talked about lifestyle medicine, the importance of clean food, fresh air, exercise. In this day and age now, conventional medicine, allopathic medicine are only just starting to teach their patients this kind of information. It's phenomenal in a bad way. Not phenomenal in the good way of using the word. So let me just tell you a couple of quick things about homeopathy. It's based on the law of similars, and it's a very precisely selected system of medicine just for you. Fundamental principle of homeopathy is the law of similars. It is a natural law. It was first identified at least 3,000 years ago. So you can read about it, Hippocrates writing, the Egyptian papyri, it's in the Hebrew Bible. God heals with that which he smites. Samuel Hahnemann, who put this system together, it was already known, the law of similars, 3,000 years ago, but he systematized it into a system of medicine that we can use and which he could teach to other people. So homeopathy comes from the Greek homeo, meaning similar, pathos, meaning suffering. It's like yours like. So this is the basis of homeopathy. And if I want to give you a simplistic example of how to try and imagine the law of similars, everybody, most people, have chopped onions. When you chop the onions, the juice you may breathe it in, it may get in your eye. What happens usually is that we look as if we've got a streaming head cold because our eyes run, our nose runs clear mucus, our eyes itch, sting, etc. So that would remind us of a streaming head cold. It would always also remind us of certain kinds of hay fever. And so a potentized medicine, a specially prepared medicine, would be chosen homeopathically, the law of similars. What we'll create will also heal. So you might be prescribed a medicine called Allium cepa, which is made from red onion. So as a simple example of the law of similars, we might think about what it's like to chop an onion. Most of us have done that. Most of us end up with a tearing eyes and a clear mucus from our nose. And when we experience that, it reminds us of a head cold, certain kinds of streaming head colds, or certain kinds of hay fever. So that would make us think of the law of similars. What will produce in a healthy person will resolve those situations when they're found as part of a disease. So in this case, let's just say hay fever. So for some kinds of hay fever that have that streaming, we might be prescribed Allium cepa, which is made from red onion. More about that later. So individualized medicine, again, unique to you. It's tailor-made for the patient, for their current complaint and symptoms. It takes into account their overall health, their lifestyle, their medical history, their family history, the underlying causation that might have precipitated this condition. Sometimes it's easy for a patient to say, this happened, and ever since then, I haven't been well. Sometimes that underlying cause could have happened 20 years ago, and by now you've forgotten. So part of the case taking in homeopathy is to draw a line between those two events so that we can go back to the original cause and really resolve it. So you can see, given that no two cases will be the same, whatever the diagnostic label you might have been given by allopathic medicine, by your GP. The wonderful thing about homeopathy is it is safe, gentle, effective medicine. It's actually probably the safest medicine the FDA would ever regulate, will ever regulate. It has an exemplary safety record for more than 200 years, almost no adverse reactions. The medicine are specially prepared to increase their effectiveness while eliminating potential negative effects. So they're very, very safe, even for newborn babies, even for animals, for the elderly, and everybody in between. And the medicines that we prescribe conform to the law of the minimum dose. So there's a reason that homeopathy is called the gentle healing art. The law of the minimum dose says that we're prescribing the lowest potency, the lowest strength, if you like, of medicine in the least amount and for the least number of doses. And the disclaimer is, of course, that we measure that by what is appropriate for the case. So it's the lowest strength, lowest potency for that case, which obviously will be different depending on the seriousness, etc. So yes, it's individualized to the nth degree. No 3 times a day this medicine for months on end or whatever. We are looking to do the least intervention possible. Affordable medicine, from the beginning, homeopathy was offered to the world to heal the suffering humanity. And if you go to India, where homeopathy is extremely popular, you will hear Indians say that homeopathy is for the suffering humanity. Mahatma Gandhi said homeopathy cures a larger percentage of cases than any other form of treatment and is beyond doubt safer and more economical. So it's kind of been a mantra, if you like, for India. It's used in many countries. Just an example, French GPs, general practitioners who integrated homeopathy into their practices, made an annual saving of 20% with no loss of clinical results. So they got the same clinical results, but it cost a lot less because they're using a lot less pharmaceutical drugs. The high dilution issue and safety. So it's manufactured in government regulated pharmacies. It's very specific criteria laid down in homeopathic pharmacopoeias. They have to do it according to the book, if you like, specially prepared in a process called potentization, safe, gentle, yet effective, because all toxicity has been removed. So we can use essentially what would normally be toxic medicine freely, safely, to the benefit of the patient. There's now solid research that homeopathy is not simply water, simply a placebo. And the memory of water is now accepted by eminent scientists. And it's a great pity that Jacques Benveniste, who first talked about the memory of water back in the 1980s, was disparaged. He lost his funding for his research. And the amount of ridicule and pressure that he got not to investigate this issue, I believe, that's my belief, it took him to an early grave. So, high dilution issue. There was a conference in 2018 at the Royal Society of Medicine in the UK. That establishment is where people like Darwin, people like Fleming, other eminent scientists presented their world-changing discoveries at the Royal Society of Medicine. It's hundreds of years old. So to have a conference called the New Horizons in Water Science, the Evidence for Homeopathy at the Royal Society of Medicine is quite something. So they asked the question, does the process of potentization in the production of homeopathic medicine fundamentally affect the structure of the water? Can this then explain how the source material persists after many dilutions? And world-class scientists, including 2 Nobel laureates, said, yes, absolutely. Stephen is doing incredible research with water using lakes. So he will drop the homeopathic medicine in one side of the lake, and 15 minutes later, it can be detectable using these dyes on the other side of the lake, hundreds of meters away. So it isn't the currents that is carrying the homeopathic medicine over there, it's something else. So Stephen calls the difference between the water and the homeopathic medicine X. And he's saying that it's the X, which we can't name yet. We don't know what this X is, but that is what is responsible for the therapeutic action of homeopathic medicine, of potentized substance. Very exciting research. Originally, the biggest criticism of homeopathy is, We don't know how it works. We can't prove how it works. Obviously, now we're really getting into quantum physics, quantum mechanics. It's getting closer and closer to an explanation. But the interesting thing is Hahnemann, when he first put this system together, he said, I have no idea how it works. And I'm paraphrasing, quite frankly, I don't mind that I don't know how it works. The most important thing is that it does work and it's healing the sick. So I'm going to carry on using it. And that's basically the position that we take now. We know it's going to come. When I was at training back in the 1980s, early 80s, we were told it was the medicine of the 21st century because we didn't have the language, we didn't have the science. You know, quantum was only just being talked about. And now here we are talking about the future of medicine. We still don't quite know how to explain it, but we have hundreds of millions of cured cases in the time that we've been using it. I mean, every day in every homeopathic clinic, there are resolutions. Production of homeopathic medicine uses minimal resources. This is the huge difference between us and pharmaceutical medicine. Phenomenal difference. We don't need to, grow special things and harvest them and chop them up and take pieces of animals and etc. We have minimal resources because of the potentization process. So therefore, we have no impact on the natural world. We have no waste and no pollution, basically. It's affordable because we can keep creating it. So therefore, the perfect medicine for the developing world in general. It can be sustainably produced locally, which improves the health of the population and positively impacts their economy. So poor countries can make use of this. They can make their own homeopathic medicine. They don't have to depend on the West or America. They can do their own thing, which for me is a really important aspect. It's global. It's for everyone. Effectiveness studies, using the medicine in real time without the constraints of a limited trial. So that's basically what you need to do. And this is what happens when we do the RCT on pharmaceutical medicine, and it all looks fantastic. But when that medicine is then used in real time with real patients in the real world, we find all kinds of problems that we didn't realize, and the drug has to be retracted. In this case, homeopathy wins hands down because it's individualized, prescribed for the individual patient, not the diagnostic label, and it allows time for the patient to heal at their own speed. So your healing energy, again, is individualized. It's different for everybody. And you will heal at your own speed. So if I put you in a trial which lasts for 6 weeks with homeopathy, that might not be the speed at which you can heal. So at the end of 6 weeks, you might say, well, it hasn't really done any good because you need longer to resolve your issues. So you're treating the patient, not the disease label. This is the whole thing. So that is effectiveness studies, using it in real time with real patients in the real world. But I will say something about the randomized controlled trials that the pharmaceutical industry is so fixated on. In actual fact, the first randomized controlled trials were done by homeopaths at least 40 years before the allopaths thought about using them to test their own drugs. So homeopathy has been at the front of the game since Hahnemann first published the Organon. So quick question, if it's so good, why don't doctors use it? Well, they do. In the UK, the Faculty of Homeopathy prescribes as part of the National Health Service. The UK royal family has always had a homeopathic medical doctor since before Queen Victoria. Medical doctors in countries as diverse as Switzerland, India, Mexico, South Africa, and everywhere in between prescribe it as part of their National Health Service. Or you can get it privately or in local clinics, that's part of what I did when I was traveling to the developing world, let's say difficult places where they had no other kinds of medicine. I interviewed the minister of Tanzania at the time, and I asked him about what he thought about homeopathic medicine. I was researching malaria at the time, and he said he doesn't mind what you call it, where it comes from, how it's made, as long as it's safe, effective, gentle, and the local people want it and it's working for them, which is why I went to many places setting up small clinics. And then those small clinics, of course, expanded because the local people and the local dignitaries and the local ministers saw the effect of it. So again, sadly, still fear of ridicule and being ostracized by colleagues prevents many doctors from even exploring homeopathy, which is really a great shame. So we truly need preventative medicine, sustainable, affordable, safe, gentle, effective, green, zero waste. It's light years away. Homeopathy can transform food production. Here's another advantage of it. You can use it in farming. It can resolve infectious diseases in farm animals like mastitis, like orphan sheep, etc., without the use of antibiotics. And crops, it not only makes plants resistant to disease, it increases their nutritional value without the use of pesticides. Imagine what that could do for food production and the quality of the food, whether you eat animals or not, whether you're vegan or gluten-free or whatever. You could transform food production and through that transform the quality of the food that people eat and therefore improve their health without even using homeopathic medicine yourself. Homeopathy has a huge history of effectiveness in epidemics, right back to the cholera epidemics, the typhoid epidemics, all those epidemics, the Spanish flu in 1918. Homeopathy has a huge history of effectiveness there. And most recently in Cuba, it solved their annual leptospirosis epidemics when in 2007, they used a homeopathic preventative instead of the usual conventional vaccine. So that was the largest trial of homeopathic medicine in history. 2.5 million Cubans were given the preventative, and it dramatically reduced the number of cases and therefore the death rate. And the effect lasted for years later. Gustavo Bracco from the Finlay Institute in Cuba, who at the time was producing conventional vaccines, but could not keep up with how many they needed for this particular epidemic in that year, solved the problem by going to homeopathy and using the homeopathic preventative. I met him when he first came to Europe, and he gave me an interview as I'm making another film at that time. And he could not get the results of that trial published in any medical journal ever to this day. And the only journal in the end that he was driven, if you like, to publish it was in the journal Homeopathy. So I'm throwing that in there to give you an example of what happens. There's a lot happening in the background. If that had been an allopathic prevention, that would have been on mainstream media, primetime news. So don't let it worry you when you go to Wikipedia, when you're not going to go to Wikipedia now. But if you did, don't worry if you don't find anything good about homeopathy. These are the reasons why. There is an active suppression, if you like. And yet, despite all attempts to suppress homeopathy, it is still the second most commonly used medicine in the world. It's still the fastest growing medicine in the world. In 1832, Hahnemann was granted an honorary membership into the Medical Society of the County of New York. And a few years later, the society rescinded his membership on the basis that homeopathy's growth represented an ideological and financial threat. And nothing has changed. I therefore submit the following evidence to support the working hypothesis. homeopathy can save the world. So homeopathy is truly transformative medicine, useful for all living things, exceptionally good for agriculture, both animals and crops. It has a vital role to play in preventing antimicrobial resistance. It's safe, proven effective, inexpensive, easy to transport, which, as we know, can be very difficult with conventional drugs, and not harmful to the environment. So as science, as I said before, moves from chemistry and materialism to physics and energy medicine, we can say that science is finally catching up with homeopathy. It is true preventative medicine. It has the potential to increase the health of humanity generation by generation. It has the potential to create true health for humanity and, as a consequence, a healthier planet. It has the potential to heal water, oceans, lakes, rivers. And true health includes altruism. And a truly healthy person has the ability to give service to those who need it, be that family, community, country, and as a consequence, the world in which we live. So when we heal, truly heal, transform into a truly healthy person, we are by nature then altruistic. We are looking to give service because we now are not consumed with our own ill health, but with our health, with the energy to do the things in the world that we really want to do. And so, therefore, by extrapolation, I would say I have proven that homeopathy has the potential to save the world, and therefore it must be the future of medicine. So don't listen to Wikipedia or Google for that matter. Homeopathy is the future of medicine. Investigate it for yourself, your family, your animals, your plants. Check out the full-length documentary at Introducing Homeopathy. And for more information on homeopathy in general, you can go to Homeopathy International, which we call HINT, which is at the website there, hint.org.uk. I really hope you think of this hypothesis, you shift your paradigm if you haven't done already, and even if you're in the complementary medicine world, you think about homeopathy, which offers a true alternative. It's a transformative primary care medicine. Thank you.